Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our nation has to offer, especially healthcare. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teenaccounts.
In the squadron, they called him Bullets, but we call him Greg Kelly. Greg Kelly is on the air on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Well, what else do we want to say? Is Vance taking questions? He is. That's very unusual. J.D. Vance, right now, a press conference with J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States. Sounds like it could be interesting. Do we mind? Let's go. He's standing right next to a robot, of all things.
The leadership that's fixing the problems, not the leadership that created them.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Matt Smith from WISN TV in Milwaukee. On the fraud efforts and what we saw in Minnesota yesterday, here in Wisconsin, the governor has refused to give over the SNAP data here in the state, along with the voter data. I'm curious, is there a point, or at what point would the administration withhold federal funds from Wisconsin?
Well, look, we're going to look at every option that we have because we've got to stop this terrible fraud, but that is absurd. Ask yourself a question. Why would the government of Wisconsin not want to help us kick fraud off of the welfare rolls and kick fraud off of the voter rolls? And the only answer I can possibly come up with is because they like to cheat. There's no other real explanation. Now, the governor might say, in fact, I'm sure the governor would say this. Let me just be charitable to those who disagree with us. The governor would say, well, there isn't as much fraud as the Trump administration believes there is. Well, even if that's true, and it's not, but even if that's true, let's get what fraud there is off the voter rolls and off the welfare rolls. You know the right number of people who should be illegally voting in American elections? 0. You know the number of people who should be fraudulently collecting food stamps? 0. I want those benefits to exist for the people who need them. The only way to promise that is to get the fraud out of the system, and that's what we're trying to do in the Trump administration. No more fraud, no more corruption. It shouldn't be hard.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Ellie Davis, Local 5 News. What should data centers do to be good community partners?
Well, that's a very, very good question. And you saw the president talk about this in the State of the Union address. Look, there's a good news and a bad news with data centers. Now, the good news is, first of all, they're big facilities. You create a lot of construction jobs. And this next generation of the technological revolution, you need those data centers to make that run. Those data centers are like the gasoline of the technology revolution that we're going to see over the next 75 years. And I don't know about you all, but I want America to win that technology revolution. I don't want China or some other country to win it. And so that's why we got to have these things. Now, here's the downside. If those centers are built and the local governments aren't ensuring that there's enough power for those data centers, then it's going to increase electricity costs for everybody else. And so what we think the data centers have got to do is they've got to work with the local governments, with the state governments, and in the federal government, we are trying to do everything that we can so that if you build a data center, for example, you can just build a power plant right next door. What I think we ought to be working towards is you build those data centers and electricity costs come down for American citizens instead of going up for American citizens. The data centers can afford it. We got to make sure that they're good neighbors so that when they come in and build these great buildings, the people in their neighborhood, the people in their community benefit too, and that's through lower power. That's the best way they can be good neighbors. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Laura Schulte. I'm a reporter with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. And in Wisconsin, rural hospitals are struggling. Closures are creating healthcare deserts for parts of the state. And what can be done federally to keep those hospitals open and providing necessary care to community members?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. It's a very, very serious problem. And unfortunately, this, like so much of else of what's going on in our country right now, is a problem that we inherited from the last administration. If you look at the number of rural hospital closures that were happening in 2022 and 2023 and 2024, it was really accelerating. And it's one of the reasons why it's not a provision that's talked about as much, but if you look in the big, beautiful bill, the Working Families Tax Cut, however you're calling it, in that legislation, there is a multi-billion-dollar rural hospital fund to try to help these rural hospitals persevere in tough times, stay open, provide essential services, and get them to a place where they're on firmer financial footing. Nothing like that, I don't believe, Derek, had ever existed in the federal government before. But we said, look, we cannot let these rural hospitals just disappear. So we created this fund to try to, support the ones that can stay open and try to slow the closures for the ones that are going to have to close. We think that we're starting to see some good evidence from those. It takes a little bit of time for that tens of billions of dollars to work its way through the system. But that's the number one thing. And then the number two thing is the Trump administration did a number of things in the first term, and we're trying to do this in the second term to give patients more choice. Because what we often do in our healthcare system, like for example, if you're a veteran, under the Biden administration, we would force veterans to drive an hour and a half away to a big city hospital when they could maybe go to a telehealth appointment in their own home or maybe drive 15 minutes down the road to the local doctor. So we've tried to empower people to have more choice, because if they have more choice, they're going to be able to stay in their communities, which means more money going to those rural healthcare organizations. And that's the way that we save rural healthcare too. It's a tough problem. I'm not going to pretend it's easy, but we are working as hard as we can to make sure that the people in our rural communities still have access to great healthcare. Thank you.
Local questions. I like these questions. They're not nasty national media.
Stephanie Hoff with the Midwest Farm Report Radio Network, talking to farmers across the state of Wisconsin. My question for you today is, commodity markets have not been friendly to Wisconsin farmers. I'm talking corn, soybeans, and dairy. What is the administration doing to bolster trade, increase export markets, and those relationships to bring market prices back up?
Yeah, so the good news on that is that our great Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke, has been on this from the very beginning. I think it was maybe the first cabinet meeting where Brooke comes up to me and says, JD, the farmers have inherited a mess, and we've got to do everything that we can to ensure that they can stay afloat during this very tough time. So one of the things that we're doing is making sure that wherever commodity prices are, that our farmers can do their job, they can provide their food, and if they fall on tough times, there's a little bit of a support mechanism there. Now, you might say, why do we do that? But the answer is actually very simple. If we don't have American sovereignty in our food supply, we don't have sovereignty at all. If you cannot depend on your neighbors to provide your food, if the food that you're relying on comes from another country, say goodbye to sovereignty, because that country is the one that controls you. The country that controls the food is the country that will ultimately control the entire world. So we've made very strong efforts, and we're going to keep on working at this with our farmers to ensure that whatever commodity prices are, they're able to stay afloat, they're able to grow their products. We know that they're struggling, and we're trying hard to fix that. The other thing the president has done is, for a very long time, China, one of the biggest buyers of soybeans, they would take advantage of American markets, but they would not take the product of Wisconsin farmers, whether it's corn or soybean or whatever it is, they would not offload that product into their country. Now, that was a fundamental unfairness, and that's why the president is fighting back and making sure that we have fair trade practices. If you don't have countries honoring the United States of America, our great farmers and our great manufacturers, if you have countries that are able to come in and undercut the wages of our workers, but we're not able to export their product, ladies and gentlemen, that is not trade, that is international fraud, and that's what's been happening far too long all over the world. The President of the United States is stopping it. We're going to keep on stopping it to the benefit not just of Wisconsin farmers, but Wisconsin manufacturers too. So let's say we'll take two more questions here. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Dylan Eckhart, 9 News, out of Wausau, WAOW. Nationally, there has been bipartisan legislation introduced sticking with agriculture. For example, the Domestic Organic Investment Act, which would make a USDA's development grant permanent, allowing for grants for farmers and businesses. How will the administration continue to work with local farmers and businesses in Wisconsin, especially central Wisconsin, to expand on some of those ideas and introduce legislation?
Well, you heard a little bit of my answer in the last question, but you're right that there's a lot of legislation that's working through the Congress, and as broken as Congress is as an institution sometimes, there are still some good pieces of bipartisan legislation that happen. Luckily, I think agriculture is one of those areas where you still have some good bipartisan pieces of legislation. You ask how we're going to work with local farmers, especially in central Wisconsin, and the answer is just to listen. You know, we've got a great legislative team at the White House, but we've also got a lot of great allies like Derek Van Orden in Congress. And what these guys are doing is they're coming to us with ideas. And they're saying, look, we heard from our constituents, this is something we've got to do. You know, whatever the product is, you know, sometimes they're most concerned about commodity prices. They're worried that the soybeans and the corn, it's way too low. Sometimes they're worried, of course, about inputs. They're worried about fertilizer. They're worried about the cost of fuel. So what we just try to do is work with our allies in Congress, and frankly, we'll work with anybody in Congress who has good ideas about how to help our farmers. We're going to have some good legislation on this front over the next year. It's just a question of getting it over the hill, getting it to the president's signature, or to the president's desk, I should say, for his signature. Thank you. One more question.
Thank you, Vice President. Derek Schritz, Newswatch 12 in Rhinelander. Wanted to ask about the healthcare worker shortages in several hospitals. Hospitals in Wisconsin are experiencing or are worried about the aging demographic shift. And I'm wondering what the administration will do to bolster the healthcare workforce in the coming years.
Yeah, a couple things that we see is one, you know, we're encouraging hospitals and all healthcare providers, and we're seeing some evidence of this, to use technology to your advantage, right? So if you've got, let's say, a guy who needs to see a doctor, but he can see that doctor from the comfort of his own home, doing a telehealth appointment. You know, sometimes you got to go into the doctor. Sometimes you can actually do that by just talking to the doctor at home. That we're trying to encourage because that puts less stress on some of the healthcare workers. If you can just see somebody quickly, it's in and out. You don't have to deal with all the paperwork of coming in for a doctor's visit. That's one of the ways that you relieve that stress and shortage that we see in our healthcare workforce. The other thing is that we're investing a lot to try to make sure that we meet the doctor, the nurse, the physician assistant shortage. The basic problem that we had in our country is that for a long time, we would encourage people to get like women's studies degrees in the United States of America, which, you know, maybe you need a few of those. I'm not sure how much. But what you really need is doctors. You need nurses. You need people who can work with their hands. You need people who can work on a farm. You need people who build and make things and take care of people. And our education system just really underinvested in training the next generation of healthcare workers. That's not a problem that's going to be solved overnight, but it is something we're working to solve because we want, I mean, you know, I see kids in the audience. I'm sure everybody has a young person who wants to be a healthcare worker, knows somebody in your family or your friendship circle that wants to work in healthcare. We got to make it easier for our young people to choose those careers. Unfortunately, for a very long time, we've actually made it harder for people to go into the healthcare field. We layer up those who do with debt, and we make it harder for them to join the workforce. We're trying to make it easier for people to enter the healthcare field, and in doing that, that's how you release the long-term shortage. So that's all I have. I appreciate everybody who asked a question. I'm sorry if you didn't get time to ask a question, but let me just leave you with this one final thought. So I've got 3 little kids at home, and I've got one on the way. I've got an 8-year-old, I've got a 6-year-old, I've got a 4-year-old, and Usha is pregnant with baby number 4. which we're very happy about, very proud of. Thank you. But my 8-year-old, he's gotten really into football in the last probably 3 or 4 months. Don't hold it against him. He's an Ohio State fan. That's his dad rubbing off on him. Are we Wisconsin fans here in central Wisconsin? Okay. But here's the thing. We watched over the past few days. We watched Rudy. Does everybody remember the movie Rudy, about this guy? He was too little. He wasn't fast enough. He was 5'6", but he worked his tail end off, and he made the Notre Dame football team at really the height of Notre Dame's power. I mean, they were one of the best. They still are, but they really were one of the best football programs back in the country. And it really is just this incredible tale of a guy who believed in his dreams, who fought for those dreams, and would never give up. A classic American tale. But I was watching that movie and I realized the 3 most important people in that movie, obviously one is Rudy, the guy who became the football player. But number 2 is Rudy's dad. And number 3 is the priest. There's a priest in the movie who sort of serves as a spiritual counselor to Rudy. And it kind of hit me watching this movie that the American dream takes many shapes and sizes. I think all of us know that. Even among our own kids, our grandkids, our friends and family, you've got the striver. You've got the guy like Rudy who's got really big dreams, wants to play football for Notre Dame, and is going to make those big dreams happen. But you've also got a guy like Rudy's dad, a guy who just wanted to work a good job, who wanted dignified work, who wanted to raise his family and take a nice vacation every now and then. And then you have this priest who was kind of the glue that held everything together, that helped people when they were struggling, that provided counsel to people when they were down on their luck, and was empowered to be a leader in the community. And I realized watching this that when we talk about the American dream, I'm not talking about my American dream. I'm talking about your American dream. Whether you want to have a good job and raise a healthy, happy family, whether your kid wants to go off and play college football, whether you want to start a business like the one that we're standing in.
What do we got to do? Watch Rudy?
Whatever it is, the great thing about this country is that the American dream comes in many shapes and sizes.
All right, thank you very much. I was not as big a fan of the movie Rudy, and I don't remember the old man, but anyway, I love that J.D. Vance. To be continued. We'll be right back.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our nation has to offer, especially health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
Greg Kelly on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
All right, we are back. Good news. There is a termination of a whole bunch of bad FBI agents, bad FBI agents who facilitated that unbelievably unjust raid on Mar-a-Lago. Man, it's a beautiful thing to see the accountability. Never in their wildest dreams would President Trump have been back in the White House and Kash Patel as the FBI director. You know, you have to behave with integrity no matter what. No matter who you think is going to win or lose. And that's what these guys did not do. It's a fascinating moment. We'll be right back with a very special guest, the CEO of Abacus Global Management.
Greg Kelly, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
That silly Dick Van Dyke. He trips on the way into the house. I didn't see him and, what's her name? Mary Tyler Moore as a couple. Something told me that was... Anyway, the Dick Van Dyke Show. Dick Van Dyke is alive and well at the age of like 100 or so. It's an amazing man. He's a big legend in Hollywood. More on him in a moment. It kind of factors into my conversation with Jay Jackson, the chairman and CEO of Abacus Global Management. You can go to abacusgm.com. Fascinating business you're in, but you know what, Mr. Jackson, I would have pegged you for the CEO no matter what.
Yeah.
You got that CEO way about you.
Yeah, maybe it's the suit, the tie, the whole thing right now.
Suit, tie, 6'2",
yeah,
whatever. I mean, you are a born leader. Have you ever been told that?
I just by my dad. Yeah, that's the only way, and that was only for just a little while.
So, Abacus Global Management, abacusgm.com. First of all, what is that?
So Abacus Global Management is a company that has really 4 verticals, but it's based on a core, simple thought process, is that using your lifespan data and applying it to different financial services really matters, right? And the first thing is, how do you get it? We've been doing this for over 20 years, and it started with insurance, right? Having people better understand the current value of their life insurance policy, then they need to better understand how long they're going to remain in that contract, right? It's a crazy thing. We get so uncomfortable talking about mortality because it depends on where you are in your own life arc. If you're younger, you're really uncomfortable with it. You think you're going to live forever. If you're older, you're sick of it, right? You're like, man, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Either way, we need to start having those conversations, because if the number one fear is running out of money in retirement, life insurance is a piece of this, but shouldn't you also know how long you're going to be in retirement? You have target date funds to get you there, but you have no allocation on what's going to happen when you're there. And that's why people need to understand what they're investing and buying, and that's what Abacus helps them do.
All right, so that's a big factor. Yeah, how long am I going to live in retirement? I guess we need to know that.
Yeah.
And you guys can pinpoint that how?
So we actually aggregate an individual's medical file, so it's a custom solution. So we get a HIPAA release, we get all their medical files, and then what we do is we compare them to every person just like them over the last 20 to 30 years that's had a mortality experience that has the exact same type of medical impairments, right? Also family history, like, so they have cardiovascular disease, liver disease, what's their weight, what's their family history look like, where do they live? You look at all those factors, and then you say, over the next several years, how many mortalities have happened in the past? It's not a guess. It's actually what happened to people just like you. So we're not trying to take the whole population and say smoker, non-smoker. We're trying to say, this is exactly what this person has. This is what's happened. And because of that, this is where the highest mortality range is for people who are just like you, meaning that might be 7 years, it might be 10 years, it might be 15 years. You always have some variance, and it's a curve. Some on the front end, some go longer. What impacts that, right? And I think that's what we always find so interesting, is how valuable that data can be to someone when, let's say, they're 80 years old. Or actually, let me take a step back. If you're 65, what's one of the first decisions you have to make right now? Am I going to collect Social Security? Right? Am I going to defer?
Everybody does, right? Pretty much. Well, not really. There's an advantage to
There's this whole trend around people deferring Social Security. My premise is, why on earth would you make that decision without the information, right? Shouldn't you know what your estimated lifespan is and your probability? Because then if you're going to defer and collect a higher payment at age, let's say 72 or 75, you should have an informed decision of what drove that, right? Why do you think you're going to live to 85? When in some cases, you're 65, probabilistically, they're sitting at a 10-year lifespan, 75, you should never defer. You should take that money right now. And those are the financial decisions that we're just ignoring. And that data is so, so valuable.
So Abacus Global. So persons out there,
yeah,
they want to know, they should know, not from a doctor, but from you, actually, how much longer they have to live.
Right.
So let's say you tell them, you're probably going to live another 9 years.
Right.
Then what happens?
Well, first thing happens is this, which is probably a unique experience that most of your listeners wouldn't imagine. The first thing I'm told is, no way I'm living that long, by the way.
Oh.
That's the number one response by far. And that should be the first concern that we have. We hear all out there from Elon Musk to everybody that we're going to live forever, right? That's just not going to happen, right? You mentioned Dick Van Dyke in the early part of our conversation, or this entry point to this. Before Dick Van Dyke, there hadn't been another centurion over 6 feet tall, right? The whole thing of Dick Van Dyke living to 100, the media missed the biggest part of that story. He's over 6 foot tall.
He's like 6'5" or something, right?
6'1", but that hadn't happened before. at least that people had measured and looked at. Why? There's a number of reasons why people over 6 feet tall don't live to 100. Like myself, who's 6'5", there's not anyone we can find that's lived older than 95. So what are we doing, right? Why are we making this exception to say that, oh, I'm going to delay this. I'm going to not talk about this. I'm not going to have this conversation, because that's ultimately what ends up happening. And then when you're 80, it's too late. And what I mean by that is, by the time we tell somebody what their lifespan is, guess what? They're sitting back going, I don't feel good. My medicine's terrible. You're telling me I'm going to be here another 7 years? This is miserable. Because like my father, who passed away in August, right? The last 2 years are brutal, right? He was a fireman for 40 years, and the last 2 years are incredibly expensive, painful, and he goes through a process. But it was only 2 years. Greg, imagine if that's 4 years. You're going to watch half your net worth disappear in the last 4 years of life, just in medical costs. And I think those are the things we have to start paying attention to.
Okay, so once we know and we make some decisions, you help us make those decisions, and then you can help us either liquefy or invest, or you guys do that too,
we
right?
We do. So some of the options that we provide, right? Like the first thing we'll do is we'll talk about a life insurance policy. Life insurance, $14 trillion industry, right? 2.5 times U.S. residential real estate market. It is massive. It is designed to fail, though. Here's what I mean by that. 90% of all policies never pay a claim. That should shock people. 90. Those over the age of 65, 75% never pay a claim.
Why not?
It's not because the insurance companies did anything nefarious. You know what happens? You get to be 75 or 80 years old, and you look around and you're saying, my kids are grown. Why am I paying this thing? They view it as debt, not equity. However, we are a great country. In the United States, Supreme Court ruled in 1911 that life insurance is personal property, just like your home. Nowhere else in the world does that ruling exist. And what it means is you own that contract. Therefore, you can sell and transfer it to a third party for today's market value. Okay, fine. How do you understand what today's market value is? First thing you do when you look at net present value of a contract, how long am I going to be in the contract, right? You understand your lifespan. So all of a sudden, you have $1 million life insurance policy. You're 80 years old. You run your lifespan data, determine it's about 7 years remaining, plus or minus, and you're saying to yourself, okay, this is how much in future cost I have over the next 7 years. You can easily equate that. And then you solve for what the current value is. Look, in 7 years, worth $1 million when you pass away to your heirs. But today, that might be worth $250,000. Abacus has paid out nearly $250 million last year to seniors, just on their insurance. And then once you get that, it's, okay, now how do you allocate based upon what that 7-year time frame is, right? If you're 65, same philosophy, how should you allocate differently? Right? How should you think about having conversations with your beneficiaries? And I think it's going to be the biggest change in financial services. JP Morgan doesn't talk about it, and they should. And everybody else should. Is they set up financial plans to fail because they don't have the underlying data. That's where Abacus sits in applying what we deemed our longevity and lifespan data and started applying it to different financial services. Look, we're a publicly traded company, right? We trade on the New York Stock Exchange. And because of that, we're able to put this information out transparently. What's happening to financial services stocks right now? You see this in AI, right? Everyone's getting displaced by AI. AI is coming in and saying, I'm going to do financial services better. Do you know what company AI needs? Us, the source data. They need us. They can't operate without us. AI is nothing without the data that comes in. So they require our inputs to help build these financial plans. So you look at companies like ours that are insulated from this AI disruption that actually benefit. That's where you should start to be thinking.
Okay. Well, that's a lot on our plate.
Yeah.
But it's okay. Now, I mean, what's the next move? What do I do? I mean, this is very compelling. AbacusGM.com. Just go there and it helps us.
Abacus GM gets you a good start, right? Like you can start to kind of see the path. We have alternative investment funds. We have the insurance life solutions division. We have our data and tech division where we can start to help you better understand how to utilize and capture that lifespan data. It's a program called LifeArc, which we're introducing. You know, your lifespan's not a straight line. It's an arc of possibilities. The things that get me excited about the data, though, Greg, is that you can start to have an impact earlier, right? That education really flips the mindset. I'll give you an example. You know, we all know one of the biggest impacts you can have on lifespan is exercise, muscle mass, right? How do you do it? How do you get there? How do you motivate someone to do that? We all know that exercise matters, but nobody does it, right? How do you change habits, right? Typically fear and greed. Right? Think about it, right? It changes a lot of things. If you have a life-changing event, you have a heart attack, what happens? You eat better. That's fear, right? I say be greedy. understand that I want to be super healthy when I'm 80. I want to be able to exercise. I want to be able to do these things. I want to have functionality. Be greedy with your life. And the simple steps are, here's a great tip for all your listeners. You want to change somebody's life in their 70s? Buy them the gift of a second language. Look, I'm not going to tell you which language company to go for. I don't rep them. I don't know them. But give somebody the gift of a second language. Here's why. Seniors at an alarming rate are more lonely than they've ever been. This is a really startling scenario. Seniors on a age basis, if you look at suicide rates in the United States, those over the age of 65 have the highest suicide rates in the country.
Oh, boy.
Over the age of 75 is number one.
Yikes.
What's happening, right? What's happening? What's happening is they're lonely, they don't communicate, these kinds of things. And give somebody the gift of a second language. One, what it does helps them neurologically, delays onset dementia. Two, what else do you do if you learn a second language? You talk, communicate, you build a community, right? What about travel, right? If you learn Spanish, go to Spain, go there for a month. And now you're integrating yourself into a culture. You're making new friends. But here's the most important piece. What did you just motivate that 75-year-old to do? Exercise. They're going to walk around and see things, right? They're going to travel and tour as tourists, be tourists. And you know what else they're going to do? They're going to take that backpack or luggage or whatever they have and try to lift it into the overhead compartment. What is that? It's a squat and a press.
I never knew we'd get this out of Abacus Global Management, but it's so beautiful.
The data matters, right? This is what you can do with great data. You can actually have a big impact financially and personally.
So interesting. So interesting. All right. Now, first, a little bit more about you. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a little small town called Shaver Lake, which is population 5, I think, and I'm the youngest of 5. So I think we were it.
Shaver Lake is where?
It's in Central California. It's not too far from Yosemite. It's about an hour and a half from anywhere on a map.
Wow. Yeah, California. You don't think of it that way.
I know. We were rugged. My dad was a fireman. And, look, we slept in a 1-bedroom cabin on the floor and, you chopped wood all summer. And it's a whole nother interesting piece, right? Like in those days, California was a little more open to, less regulated when it came to lumber and chopping trees and those kinds of things. And so we as a community would go out, we'd cut trees, we'd sell the wood. And it would prevent things like underbrush from building up, all those kinds of things that ultimately end up really hurting that state.
All right. So you grew up Abe Lincoln style.
A little bit.
And then high school, college. Where'd you go to college?
Yeah, out in Fresno. And then I found
Fresno
my way.
State?
Yeah, I found my way right away to a really cool mutual fund company called Franklin Templeton.
We've all heard of that one.
Yeah, well, we were smaller then, right? And it was great about that business. They're owned by the Johnsons and they're a public company, and they gave everybody a shot, right? And, for me, from answering phones to working mail and doing everything that you could there to try to get ahead, they recognized that work. And it was expensive to live there, and times where you'd sleep in your car just to, get to work.
Where are they headquartered?
San Mateo, which is just outside San Francisco.
Oh, yeah, that's...
Yeah, so you would do everything you can to try to get there and then live in a nearby community.
Interesting. All right. Well, now you're publicly traded. ABX
is the symbol, and we've had a great run. I think since we went public, and if we look at 25, I think our year-over-year gross are triple-digit bottom and top line margins, north of 50 plus 60. So it's been we're in a great sweet spot overall, the alternative asset manager business, and particularly since we're data driven, I think that gives us a big advantage.
What's the hardest part about being the boss, the CEO?
I think it's the kind of the worst words you hate to hear every second is got a second.
Uh-oh.
And that happens about 50 times a day.
And people, what should people do? Email you? Your assistant?
You know what? It's such a great question and a great point. Is that the best way I find if somebody wants a response is send me 3 or 4 bullets in an email, and I'll respond to each bullet as soon as I have a chance, right? Generally at night. And if you look, a lot of times at the public company side, you find yourself, you're out talking about your stock far more often than you are running your business that you initially think. Like there's a lot of romantic piece to this when you first ring the bell, and then you realize like, oh boy, I've got to make sure that people understand who we are as a business and company, but I've also got to successfully run my business. And those who balance both and can figure out that time tend to be the most successful.
Well, I guess it's good that I'm just a worker bee.
Oh
right?
my
Just
God,
a
you are
schmo.
not a worker bee, man.
Jay Jackson, though, I mean, when people say you got a second, usually it's a manager, and I freak out. Oh boy, what's this all about? But you do in a similar way, not a similar way, in a different way. It's like, oh boy, here's my time. Your time is so valuable.
Yeah, it's super important, and like when we think about like even morning radio shows, right? That's the best time to catch us. Someone like me, I'm up at 5:30, 6 a.m. working out, listening. And it's the time we get to ourselves, so you cherish those moments, and then you've got your full day stacked typically, and then at night you're replying to those emails, and I do town halls every month with all of our employees. The thing I'm probably most proud of as a public company is 80% of our employees are owners, man. They're shareholders.
That's cool.
So, man, you walk around and everybody's checking each other, right? Like, hey, don't be ordering those extra pins.
It's cool. The town hall meetings. I've seen some of those at not well-run companies go sideways.
Yeah, we do an open policy and relationship. They have to send their questions, and everybody sends their questions in advance. I always answer every single one of them. And so it's not quite open hall, right? Like
no, but it's actually legitimate.
I'm
going to little trick of the trade. Yeah. I have given certain guests the questions ahead of time because you get more thoughtful answers. This is not stump you. This is to like, okay, I want a real answer. Maybe I have to think about it for a little while.
Right. Yeah. It's okay to have a thoughtful response.
Jay Jackson, CEO and chairman, by the way, of Abacus Global Management. Can you stick around for a moment, please?
I would love to.
All right. I'd like to know how to get rich. Okay. Can you tell me in the commercial break?
I can, actually.
Well, if you're going to tell me, you're going to have to tell everybody else. We'll be right back.
All right.
Greg Kelly, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We'll have to put that skit on hold. Just going through some great content with my guests here, Jay Jackson and Bly, the PR person, right? Is that your job there? Blake. Very prestigious name. Jay Jackson, chairman and CEO of Abacus Global Management, abacusgm.com. How do we get rich?
I define rich as wealth, right? And here's the thing. What is the most valuable and the thing you cherish most in your life? Outside of family, what is it that when you're looking back and you're potentially on your deathbed and you're going to look back and what are you going to wish you had more of? Is it going to be money? Is it going to be... It's going to be time, right?
I don't know.
It's probably going to be time. I wish I had time to do X.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It is the one thing that we always look back on and say, I can never get back. And that's health span, lifespan. I mean, it incorporates all these things. You want to be rich, be better with your time. And not just time management. What I mean is be better in the fact of when you start to accept and understand where your lifespan and mortality is, you place a higher value on time. Here's what I mean by that. Even deeper. When you're 80, you're not thinking about what your 80-year-old self is going to be and look like. You might be grumpy. You might be not. If I can show you how to literally get back a decade of your life, what's a decade of your life worth to you? That's rich, man.
Yeah.
You want to be rich? Get that decade back, right? And how do you do it? Focus on the things that happen today. Have a plan. Understand where your mortality sits, how your lifespan is going to curve, how your medical files are implicated. Like the number one cause of death in emergency rooms is misdiagnosis, not because of physicians are bad, but because you don't have your information. If someone were to ask you, give me a list of assets, right? You would immediately list jewelry, cars, homes, all the stuff you have. What you wouldn't have is your medical files. Pretty important asset, right?
Yeah.
Pretty big gift of time. Put that on a card, password protected, have that handy. Like there's little things like that I think are so important. You want to have the biggest impact on time and you want to be rich. I hate to say it. Nobody likes to do it. Get to the gym and use weights. Literally can go up to 14 to 17% extension related to lifespan on muscle mass. It takes us to GLP-1s. Everyone's talking about GLP-1s. GLP-1s is super interesting, right? Because people are taking GLP-1s with the idea that, hey, this is going to make me healthier. That is true. We could end up with a society of incredibly frail 80-year-olds because if you're taking GLP-1s and you're not working out with weights, you're not changing the habits that got you there to begin with. The Wall Street Journal came out, I think 3 weeks ago, with a study that said how quick people put weight back on once they're off GLP-1s. And I think it's 14 months. The entire weight is back. And it's because you haven't made the adjustments. Again, fear and greed, right? What motivates you? Be greedy with yourself.
I love it. President Trump is almost 80.
Yep.
Has he changed the game psychologically on age? You know what I mean? Look at what he's doing at that age.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, not health-wise. I'm not picking on the guy. Mentally, for sure.
Yeah.
Mental acuity is a big deal, and he stayed working, and I think that's a big topic, right?
Stay working, stay exercising.
Yeah.
AbacusGM.com. Jay Jackson, thank you, sir.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to The Greg Kelly Show. You can hear The Greg Kelly Show weekdays at 12:15 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Rural Americans deserve access to the best our nation has to offer, especially when it comes to health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families' health. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.